Declan adjusted his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. The elegant restaurant hummed with conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against porcelain, but all he could hear was the deafening silence of the empty chair across from him. He'd chosen this place carefully. Intimate lighting, renowned cuisine, the kind of establishment that whispered of romance rather than shouted it. Now it felt like a stage, and he was the fool performing a one-man show. Mia was 45 minutes late. The waiter approached with practiced sympathy, the kind that came from witnessing countless scenes like this. "Would you like to order, sir?"
Declan's jaw tightened. He was a successful author, his novels gracing bestseller lists and his bank account more than comfortable. He'd been on magazine covers, interviewed on television, courted by Hollywood producers. But none of that mattered when you were sitting alone in a restaurant, checking your phone every 30 seconds for a message that never came. "Yes," he said, finally, his voice steady despite the embarrassment burning in his chest. "I'll order." He chose without really reading the menu, his mind elsewhere. How would it come to this? 3 months of text messages, phone calls that stretched into the early morning hours, plans made and remade. Mia had seemed different, intelligent, witty, genuinely interested in him as a person rather than as Declan Hartley, the author. And now she'd simply vanished, like a character written out of a story without explanation.
From the kitchen's service window, Lucia paused in plating a delicate arrangement of seared scallops. She'd noticed him the moment he arrived, not because she recognized him, though she'd seen his face on book covers at the store, but because of the way he carried himself. There was something both confident and vulnerable in his posture. The way he kept glancing at the door with hope that gradually dimmed into resignation.
She knew that look. She'd worn it herself once. "Table 12 needs their entrees," her sous chef called out. "On it," Lucia replied, but her eyes drifted back to the solitary figure. She watched as his meal arrived, watched as he ate mechanically, tasting nothing. It stirred something in her chest, an unexpected protectiveness for this stranger who'd been stood up in her restaurant. Without really thinking it through, she plated one of her signature desserts, a dark chocolate tart with raspberry coulis and gold leaf, paired with a small glass of port. She scribbled a note on the restaurant's cardstock. "For when words fail, there's always chocolate." On the house, the kitchen. When the waiter delivered it, Declan looked up in surprise. He read the note, and for the first time that evening, a genuine smile touched his lips. He glanced toward the kitchen, and Lucia found herself ducking back, suddenly shy. But Declan wasn't one to let kindness go unacknowledged. He was a writer, after all. Words were his medium, his weapon, his gift. He pulled out his ever-present notebook and wrote a response, asking the waiter to deliver it to the chef. The chocolate was exquisite, but the kindness was even better. Would the artist behind this masterpiece accept a compliment in person?
Lucia's hands trembled slightly as she read his note. Her sous chef raised an eyebrow. "The guy at table 12 wants to meet you." "I know," she said, untying her apron. "Cover for me?" When she stepped out of the kitchen, still in her chef's whites, Declan stood. Up close, she could see the intelligence in his dark eyes, the slight silver threading through his hair at the temples, the way his entire face seemed to lighten when he smiled.
"You had me at hello," he said softly, and though it was a line from a movie, something about the way he said it, sincere, stripped of pretense, made it feel entirely new. Lucia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm glad you enjoyed the dessert. You seemed like you could use some cheering up." "Is it that obvious I've been stood up?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Would you sit for a moment? I promise I'm not usually this pathetic." She should have said no. She had a kitchen to run, orders to fill, a business to maintain. But something about him, about this moment, felt important. She sat. They talked for 20 minutes that felt like 20 seconds. He told her about his writing, about the strange loneliness of success, about how he'd almost given up on meeting someone real. She told him about her journey from culinary school to opening this restaurant at 28, about the terror and joy of creating something from nothing, about pouring her heart into every dish. "Your food tells a story," Declan said, and the way he looked at her made Lucia's breath catch. "I can taste the passion in it." She had to return to the kitchen, but not before he asked for her number. She wrote it on his notebook, her handwriting a contrast to his precise script. 3 days later, Declan stood outside Mia's building. He needed closure, needed to understand what had happened. When she finally appeared at her window, looking down at him with something like pity, he felt the words rising in his throat, all the hurt and confusion of the past weeks.
"I called your name," he said when she came down, and understood I was alone. Mia had the grace to look ashamed. She offered excuses, cold feet, fear of intimacy, the usual catalog of relationship avoidance, but Declan barely heard her. He realized, standing there, that he was going through the motions. His heart had already moved on, to a warm kitchen and a woman whose smile could make him forget his own name. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he told Mia, and meant it. Then he walked away, already pulling out his phone to text Lucia. Their first date was at a small bistro, nothing fancy, Lucia's choice. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair down instead of pulled back in her usual chef's bun. Declan wore a jacket, but no tie, his notebook tucked into his pocket out of habit. Later, he would write in that notebook, "I knew I'd never be able to remember what Lucia wore that day, but I also knew I'd never forget the way she looked." It was true. The specific details would fade, but the way the candlelight caught in her eyes, the way she laughed with her whole body, the way she listened like his words were the most important thing in the world, that would stay with him forever. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about learning to cook from her grandmother, about the year she spent in Italy perfecting her craft. He told her about the novel he was working on, about how he'd been stuck until recently, until a certain chef had reminded him what it felt like to be inspired. "You want the moon?" he asked, as they walked along the river after dinner, stars reflecting on the dark water. "Just say the word, and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down." Lucia laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "I don't need the moon. This is enough. You are enough." "You are so impossible," she added with a soft laughter. "I'm a writer," he corrected gently. "Being impossible is my job." The weeks turned into months. Lucia would finish her shift at the restaurant and find Declan waiting, ready with some new adventure. Midnight walks, impromptu road trips, quiet evenings where they'd read together in comfortable silence. He wrote while she experimented with new recipes, their creative energies feeding off each other. One morning, Lucia arrived at the restaurant to find an envelope taped to the door, her name written in Declan's distinctive hand. Inside was a poem, and she found herself reading it aloud to the empty dining room. "You are amazing and beautiful, not a flower or a tree. Much prettier than that, and only I can see." Her voice softened on the last line, thick with emotion. She pressed the paper to her chest, already reaching for her phone to call him. That night, sitting on her apartment balcony with the city lights spread out before them like a carpet of stars, Declan took her hand. His heart was pounding, and for a man who made his living with words, he felt suddenly inarticulate. "I've fallen in love," Lucia whispered before he could speak, her eyes wide with wonder and a little fear. "I'm an ordinary woman.
I didn't think such violent things could happen to ordinary people. Declan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of vanilla and spices that always clung to her hair. You're not ordinary. You're extraordinary. And I need you to hear this. He took a breath, gathering the words that had been building in him for weeks. I love you not only for what you are, but for what I am when I am with you, he said, his voice low and earnest. So I love you because the entire universe conspired to help me find you. Lucia's tears spilled over, but she was smiling, that radiant smile that had first caught his attention across a crowded restaurant. She kissed him then, soft and sure, and Declan thought about the strange path that had led him here. The rejection, the loneliness, the embarrassment of being stood up. If someone had told him that night, sitting alone in that restaurant, that the woman who would change his life was watching from the kitchen, he wouldn't have believed them. But that was the thing about love, about life. The best stories were the ones you couldn't predict, the ones that surprised you when you least expected it. Thank you for the chocolate tart, he murmured against her hair. Lucia laughed through her tears. Thank you for being stood up. They stayed on that balcony until dawn, talking and dreaming and planning a future that felt impossibly bright. And somewhere in the city, in a fancy restaurant, a solitary chair sat empty at a table for two, but neither of them was thinking about it anymore. Some endings, Declan realized, were really just beginnings in disguise, and some blind dates, even the ones that never happened, could still lead you exactly where you needed to be.
Thank you for reading Declan and Lucia's story. If their journey from loneliness to love touched your heart, please consider subscribing for more stories about unexpected connections, second chances, and the beautiful chaos of falling in love. Your support means the world.